Okay then, shall we make a start? Thank you, Francesca. Hi everybody, my name is Jane Starbuck. I'm the Deputy Regional Lead from Whole School Send. I'm joined today as well with Emily Walker, who's our Regional Lead from Whole School Send. And this is our first of 3 webinars looking at curriculum development aimed particularly at secondary schools and looking at identifying ways that we can effectively develop the curriculum to make sure that it meets the needs of all the students in your school. I'd just like to take this opportunity to introduce our speaker for today. It's Chris, and huge thank you for doing this, Chris. Chris is one of Her Majesty's Inspectors for Schools and a Specialist Lead for Special Educational Needs. He's a qualified teacher, head teacher, and has worked in a range of settings before joining Ofsted approximately 5 years ago, I believe. For me, provision for SEND needs to be embedded in whole school practice and not just viewed as a bolt-on or the responsibility of the SENCO. So this webinar series focuses on the importance of ensuring that all areas of the secondary curriculum are designed and adapted to meet the needs of the young people with special needs. It means that curriculum or faculty leads need to be working with school leaders, including the SENCO, and teachers to decide what this actually looks like in your own schools. This session is going to explore how the curriculum can be inclusive, accessible, and ambitious for all students. And Chris is going to look at the curriculum through the lens of the Education Inspection Framework and sharing expectations and implications for colleagues responsible for curriculum and subject areas. He'll emphasise that Ofsted are focusing on the quality provision for all students, including students with special educational needs, and this is a real high priority. And all schools are expected to have a confident and comprehensive approach to SEN support. So, excuse my dogs barking in the background. Somebody's just come to the door, the joys of home working. And over to you, Chris, and I'll go on mute. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jane, for a really lovely introduction. Can I just start by saying a huge thank you for the invite to come and speak, but also thank you to those people who've joined in on the call. I always find it a complete blessing to speak to so many people who are so passionate about SEND, and the fact that you're here now tells me that you are passionate about SEND. So thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully if somebody could come off mute and tell me when they can see it, that'd be really great. Okay, so okay, and I'm going to start. Okay, can I ask, does that work?
Yes,
perfect.
It does. Yeah.
Brilliant, fantastic. Well, thank you very much. As Jane said, what I want to do this afternoon is to really look into high quality provision for children with SEND. Okay, we're really going to unpack what this could look like in mainstream schools. But what I will say is, and I'm going to almost manage expectations to start with, if you've come along this afternoon with the view that, oh, it's going to be great, Ofsted is going to tell us exactly what we need to do, I'm really sorry, I'm not here to give the answers. And there's a reason for that. The reason is because you will know in your schools or in your settings what the best provision will be. What Ofsted are interested in is you're asking the right questions to make sure it's a high quality, to make sure it makes the greatest difference for all young people. But we're looking at a particular focus this afternoon of children with special educational needs. I have to say, as well as being a specialist lead for SEND, I am also a HMI in the West Midlands. And it's wonderful to see so many people from us across the country joining in. And I've always been told an Ofsted inspector should never say to people, I hope to see you soon when they work in schools. But who knows, I might meet some of you in a non-Ofsted inspection type of way. So let's make a start. Okay, so first of all, if you're here looking for the answers, you're looking for what Ofsted are looking for, well, what I will say is these 2 books will do it. These 2 books, freely accessible, freely download, tell you as much as you need to know about what high quality provision is for children with SEND. Okay, it's not about investing in a huge wealth or a huge library of materials to tell you what you need to do. If you're wanting to know what Ofsted are looking for, then the answers lie within these 2 documents. But please, can I urge you, and this is one of the big messages I want to say, don't do what you're doing now for Ofsted. Do it because you want to make a difference to the children at your school. Okay, we will talk this afternoon about what high quality provision looks like, but actually that should be the case all the time. It's not just waiting for that visit every 5 or 6 years. Okay, but saying that, we are going to look at some aspects from these books to unpack what's meant by high quality. And what I want to do as we go through this is to unpack some myths and challenge some beliefs that are developing around Ofsted as well, particularly around the curriculum, because there are some myths which are causing confusion. And let's actually deal with them head on this afternoon. Let's challenge them straight away. Okay, so this is what I'm looking for in our session this afternoon. We're going to look at the difference you can make, ultimately, the difference that you can make, not because you'll necessarily have all the answers yourself, but because hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have a series of questions you can ask of provisions. Whether you're a SENCO, a head teacher, you work for a specialist support service, whether you work for a multi-academy trust, or you work for a variety of different services that support schools. I'm hoping you'll be equipped with some questions that will help you to really enhance and challenge provision. As I mentioned before, we're going to reflect on some current issues at the moment, okay, around curriculums in schools. But then what I'm going to do towards the end is I'm going to encourage a dialogue and encourage a conversation, because I'm going to show you a case study. It's a case study of a fictional secondary school. And can I say, whilst it is fictional, there are some elements of that case study which we've observed in schools. Okay, but I want to give you an opportunity then to share some views, to get some conversation going about what you believe, about what you've seen. But let's deal with one of the crucial issues in here. Let's raise the profile of SEND in schools straight away. Because when we inspect schools, Jay made an incredibly valuable point before. The view are actually that perhaps Ofsted might see SEND as a bolt-on. That's not the case. SEND is a thread. SEND is, we talk about golden threads at the moment. My own personal view, I believe it's a platinum thread. It goes through everything. It goes through all aspects of it. And to give testimony to this is, when your school or your setting is inspected, the last thing that the inspection team will do before they pass the judgment is the lead inspector will quite simply say, what does this mean for children we send? So if all of a sudden they've gone through all the evidence and it's pointing that the judgments might be good or outstanding, the final question the lead inspector will ask, he will say, but is that the reality for children we send? If it's not, and if children we send do not get a good deal, that will compromise all the previous judgments. And it's not just the quality of education, it's all of them. Because if you look at our Ofsted handbook, and if you look right at the bottom of the judgments around quality of education, in that inadequate statement, which we hope will never come to us, it quite simply says, if children we send do not get a good deal, then the quality of education is inadequate. So I cannot stress importantly enough just how powerful SEND is at the moment. And this is a message to make sure your head teachers, whether you work in schools or you support head teachers, are very aware that SEND has a very high profile at the moment. But I'm going to start with a really bizarre question, okay? I'm going to say, well, who are those we have SEND? And the reason why I'm going to do this, because I want to challenge some perceptions. At the moment, nationally, we're faced with a situation of both an over-identification of SEND and an under-identification of SEND together, okay? Because actually, what we're finding is sometimes young people are identified with a perceived special need, not because they've got barriers to learning that require something different or alternative to meet those needs, but because the provision before hasn't been positive. The curriculum hasn't met their needs, okay? Or equally, they have a short-term need that they need to overcome that. So for example, we talk about the emotional impact of the pandemic on children. Well, that doesn't necessarily equate to a special educational need. That equates to an additional need at the moment for a child to receive the right support. It's not a special need. Then in the same token, we've got an under-identification, because actually when we visit schools, in lots and lots of times, schools don't seem to have an accurate understanding of the needs of children, particularly those with speech, language and communication needs. massively under-identified, that where children really are struggling to understand or process the information given to them. Okay, and actually what we find in lots of schools is that's deemed often as moderate learning difficulties. Well, what does that mean? What does moderate learning difficulties? The last time it was used in a government document was 2005. Okay, because it doesn't actually help you to understand the needs of children. So my first question today is when you're working in schools, have an accurate understanding of who are the children we send? Who are those who require something that if they didn't get, would not learn at all, not just make slower progress? So I said I'm going to give you some questions, okay? So here's the first sheet of questions that you might ask of your own provision. How do you identify those children we send? Okay, bearing in mind, it's not children who will just not make as much progress as the others. It's children that if they don't have this provision, they won't make any progress. They won't move forwards. Okay, and then the most important question, if you're sure and your work is telling you that they have special education needs, well, what are you doing to overcome that barrier? It's not enough to identify the need, you've then got to meet it. And then finally, most importantly, a common theme today is who's responsible for this? Well, let me tell you, when Ofsted come to your school, we're looking that every teacher is a teacher of SEND. Every teaching assistant has a knowledge of what the children need. And actually, I'm going to take it a step further this afternoon, that every member of staff who comes into contact with those children with those confirmed special needs knows the best way to get the best from them. Because actually, in some cases, the work can be undone when people do not know their needs. And this was something actually that Ofsted 11 years ago did a report and actually found, and this goes on to Jane's very profound point at the beginning, as much as half of the children that Ofsted visited or inspected would not have special education needs if they had a high quality curriculum. And that's what we're going to tease out this afternoon. Because actually, how many of your children have a perceived special need because their access to a curriculum that's ambitious for them is poor? Okay. And that's what, like I said, we're going to talk even more about. But let's deal with a significant, there's something we can't hide from at the moment. And we can say that the impact of the pandemic was huge for children we send. I'm going to take a step further. The impact for children we send of the pandemic still happens. It's still a lived reality at the moment. It's not something that finished when schools returned in September. Okay, and well, let's talk about what this means and why I say this. Well, if we go back to the pandemic, well, first of all, in the government's definition of those vulnerable learners, it talked about those with education and healthcare plans. But what it didn't mention was there's 1.1 million children who were defined as needing SEND support. So therefore, those children who have got very profound needs didn't have access to those quality systems that needed. And in many of them that Ofsted have found, went without any level of quality education for periods of up to 18 months, often at crucial stages in their lives. And when I say crucial stages, points of transition. Okay, movement from year 6 to year 7, movement from year 11 into post 16 provisions. So actually already these children, these most vulnerable children who need this high expectations, were already disadvantaged, and that disadvantage is going to take time to overcome. So then all of a sudden we felt, well, actually remote education must be the solution, because actually these children, but what we found is, yes, some children with special needs benefited from that. The ability to control the pace of learning, to revisit things over and over helped them. But many children with special needs really struggled. They couldn't engage with that. It was too subjective and too distant. And that actually those cues that a teacher would normally pick up on to give more support to the child weren't picked up on over a screen, whereas it could be in a classroom. And the children that Ofsted spoke to quite simply said, we want to be back in school. We're finding it difficult it wasn't a holiday for these children, it was anything but a holiday. And then if we take it a step further, we then used to be that view, well, actually, Are children able to be well supported by parents? But the pressure on parents was phenomenal during that time. Okay, they'd gone from having times where they're with their child for 18 hours a day to being with them 24/7 for long months, and that actually put an extra pressure on. And also this applies to support services. The view is, okay, it's okay now, we're back to reality, then all the support services will be able to provide that support. But the waiting list and the backlog is huge for many of these services. I noticed that a lot of people who join the call work for support services, and I dare say you are incredibly busy at the moment trying to deal with that increased need. So the question is, and please forgive the bluntness, it's the so what of it. Well, so what? The reality is quite simply, okay, never in our recent history has high quality SEND provision been needed so much. Our most vulnerable learners in schools are challenged in more ways than they've ever been before. And for that reason, it's important that these three aspects are provided. We're going to talk about that ambitious curriculum, but actually we're going to talk about the conditions that need to be in place for that curriculum to work well as well. So let's go into that, and let me give you some questions you can ask of your provision. So first of all, if Ofsted visited your school, one thing we want to know is that curriculum placed within an inclusive environment? Okay, and what I mean by that is the school actively knowing that those children have been through a difficult time, and is it filling those gaps? It's not just all of a sudden saying, well, actually, let's just go from here again, we'll make a fresh start. It doesn't work that way. And actually those gaps could result in those perceived special needs we talked about before. Is there a commitment to special educational needs? And I'm going to give an example later on of a school we did visit where they believed they were committed to special needs. But when I talk about this, is special needs something that's done once a year by the SENCO or lead training, or does it go through all aspects of the CPD programme? When you do maths, do you talk about how you can best implement the maths curriculum for children with SEND? Or is it like every September we do some training on SEND? Well, that's not about a culture. That's about a bolt-on. And then most importantly, are all children with SEND involved in all aspects? Or, and something I am going to challenge is, because children with SEND, if they don't access that curriculum that's ambitious and meets their needs, is it the case that in order to help them catch up, they miss out on those other key aspects, the art, the history, the geography, the PE, because the view is that they need to be successful in English and maths? Well, high quality and inclusive environment includes children all the time, okay, and that's what Ofsted will be looking for, okay. And just to reiterate, now this is my own personal views, this is Ofsted, actually taken from our Ofsted framework there. Okay, very, very clear messages, okay, that actually we're looking at how well that curriculum and that provision meets the needs of all children. Okay, and I love this phrase at the bottom, and I know I love this, I should say that because I work for Ofsted, but the phrase is that teachers are well equipped to better deliver quality teaching for all pupils. Okay. And that's what this crucial message of this high quality, ambitious curriculum is so important. But then actually, let's look at the statutory duties. This was there in that code of practice. And if you look at the middle phrase, it said, a school must, bound by law, ensure that children and young people with SEND engage in the activities in the school alongside pupils who do not have SEND. Fully inclusive. Okay. It's not just a case of those children will do one thing, but our children with SEND, they'll have special alternative groups. That's not inclusion. So questions you might want to ask of your provisions, okay, or of the provisions you support, okay. And I'm not going to read those out, but that might be something that straight away, if you wanted to go in and to really consider your provision, those questions might be. Because the curriculum is the big job, but the curriculum only works when it's couched in an environment that's inclusive. Next bit, okay, and this is incredibly high profile for Ofsted, okay, And that's how well you overcome the barriers. In a bit, I'm going to talk about the one curriculum. I'm not going to talk about lots of different curriculums for different groups. I'm going to talk about the one curriculum, and the success of one curriculum means that it's ambitious when children we send have their needs met in such of a way that they access that one ambitious curriculum. Okay. And actually, that's about understanding those needs really well. At the beginning of the presentation, I talked about perceived special needs because of poor quality provision or because of a short-term need. That's not special needs. It's about understanding the special needs, because in understanding the special needs, schools can then overcome the barriers to that one ambitious curriculum. And this is how you do it. Okay. This is how you ensure you have that comprehensive, deep understanding of young people. You might notice from this presentation, I'm building up to the curriculum, but actually this graduated approach will help you to make sure you understand those barriers that are stopping the children access that curriculum. And this is what Ofsted are going to ask about. We're going to ask, how well do all your members of staff involved in the education of children review, assess, plan, do, review, assess, plan, review on that constant cycle to make sure you really refine an understanding of needs. And there we go. Okay, so when we're looking at the curriculum, Ofsted are looking, is that curriculum successfully adapted, designed and developed to be ambitious and meet the needs of pupils we send? And what I mean, or what it means by meeting the needs, it means meeting and overcoming. That's what it means, that phrase, and we're going to talk more about that in a second. So if you're thinking about developing how you meet needs, those are questions I would urge you to ask of provisions tomorrow morning and on Thursday, on Friday, and next week and onwards. These are the questions. So is that graduated approach embedded? Do people assess, plan, review, do? And do you have an accurate understanding of those needs so that the provision overcomes those needs? It's not just a, well, this is what we do for all of our children we send. That doesn't work. Okay. And we're going to talk more about that, because what I want to do is challenge a belief and provide you with a question that lead inspectors will ask your head teachers when they contact you on the first day about that. But actually understanding those needs is of paramount importance. So let's move on to the curriculum. Okay. And what I want to do at this point, and I don't know if you can see, so let's see if you can see my point there. I'm going to try and circle a word. Hopefully it's come up there. Okay. What I put there is the curriculum. Okay. And actually, if you look at the Ofsted handbook, it talks about the curriculum. It doesn't talk about a curriculum or different curriculums. In a mainstream school, as many people are here, it's the curriculum. And that curriculum that you spend days, weeks, months, years on making them as ambitious as possible, well, actually, that is ambitions for children we send when they access that curriculum. Because, and if we build up before, it's not about changing the curriculum. It's not about completely different for those children. It's about overcoming the barriers to that curriculum. And this phrase we use about quality first curriculum implementation. The curriculum is the same for all your young people. It's the way you implement that curriculum changes. And that's what the focus is. And that's what Ofsted will be looking for. The curriculum stays the same, but how teachers adapt their teaching, how teachers think about, well, how do I present this so more children understand it at first value? Okay. And can I just say at this point that Ofsted's view about progress means knowing more, remembering more. So we will look, particularly for children we send, that actually there is a focus on helping them to remember things. Remember what I said earlier about those children with speech, language, and communication needs. Okay. Is there an understanding that for some of those children, remembering things is going to be harder? And that actually could lead to a perceived special need or a special need. But can also talk about preparation for the next steps. And I've highlighted it in red. Okay. The reason I've highlighted it in red, because it talks about preparation for the next steps in education, employment, training. Let's dispel a myth This isn't just what happens in year 6, 11, 13. This is what happens at the end of this lesson. This is what happens at the end of today. This is what at the end of this unit, so that children are well equipped to be successful in that next step. And that's what Ofsted are looking at. So how well does that lesson, how well does that aspect of that curriculum implementation prepare children for the next step? The way that we do this and the way that happens is understanding those needs. And how do we understand those needs? Through the graduated approach, by constantly refining them, constantly getting to know the children. Okay. So, and my bubble now has just, my mark has moved across, so please forgive that. Let's deal with the word adapted, and let's deal with that myth that's growing. The myth is that Ofsted have been aware of, that children with a special educational needs need something different. No, they don't. Children with special needs need ambition. Children with special needs need their provision to overcome the barriers to the same ambition as other children. It's not about, for these children, saying, actually, okay, I'll tell you what, you're never going to be able to do GCSE. So what we're going to do is you're going to do some different vocational accreditation. Well, don't get me wrong, that has a value. That really does have a value. But is it the most ambitious for those children, or is actually that high quality curriculum ambition for all the other children mirrored? So the two pictures here. So first of all, does your school change the implementation by generally tweaking aspects? Or is the view that children with special needs don't get it in the first view, then actually it can't be the implementation of the curriculum that's the problem, it must be the curriculum, let's change the curriculum. That's not the case. Ofsted are looking, when we talk about ambition for children with SEND, that they're accessing the same ambition as other children. That's ambition for children with SEND. And there we go. If we look in that handbook, because actually that point I mentioned about curriculum implementation, do teachers on that first presentation of the curriculum make it stick? And Ofsted do use this phrase, and I often sit in training where they say about sticky knowledge. Well, do the teachers make that knowledge stick in the long-term memory? Because that's going to help children with special educational needs. And then my next point is, and this is a challenge here, and it can give you a really sense of where special needs lies in your school. Okay, ask yourself a question at this time. If you're a SENCO, okay, at what point did you become involved in the curriculum development in your school? Did you become involved in it once the curriculum was designed and then people are signposted to you to actually work out how to differentiate the curriculum for children with SEND? Or were you involved whilst it was being developed? Were you involved at the point where a subject leader might say, do you know what, I'm not sure how this will work for some of our children with special needs. Can we talk it through? And then it's refined. Or were you involved at the start? Were you involved when somebody said, when a curriculum leader said, I want this curriculum to make a difference for all the children. I want the knowledge to stick from the start. What do I do to make sure that works? What do I do in terms of my sequencing? However you've answered that question will give you an understanding of where special needs is in your school. If you're at the start of that curriculum development and Ofsted come and ask that question, and we will ask that question, it gives us a flavour that perhaps children in this school, special needs is a high profile, and that actually it's likely they get a good deal. So questions I would urge you to ask of your curriculum at the moment. Okay. So do curriculum leaders, SEND leaders and teachers work together? Or is it the case that a curriculum is set up by a curriculum specialist and then SEND is an afterthought, or the bolt-on that we talked about at the beginning of this webinar? Okay. But what's the understanding of quality first curriculum implementation? Some people might know this as quality first teaching. Well, quality first teaching for children with SEND is making sure that knowledge sticks when it's first presented. And that involves a different approach, an approach that meets the needs of children. But what happens when a child doesn't learn that intended curriculum? And I'm not naive, and Ofsted aren't naive. We know sometimes it might not stick straight away. What happens then? Is it a case that actually it's felt, well, it must be the curriculum that's the problem, so let's abandon that curriculum? Or is it the case where they just need a short-term intervention to help to catch up? Or is it the view that the curriculum's dismantled, okay, and all of a sudden those children receive something different in the afternoons and miss out on those wide variety of opportunities that the other peers are happening? Okay, but actually that final point is, how does it help the curriculum help children to retain things in their long-term memory and to be able to pull that knowledge out when they need it? Finally, from that point, before I go on to my case study here, I want to talk about, is everyone included? Okay, and this is that point I was talking about then. Okay, if children with special needs don't get those valuable lessons from English and maths in the morning, is the view then that catch-up will happen in the afternoon? Is it the norm that a child with special needs will have extended afternoon sessions of English and maths every afternoon for every week? Okay, because English and maths is so important. Don't get me wrong, it is important, but actually so are those other opportunities. So are history, geography, art, physical education. Those are just as important. And for some children with special needs, even more important, because that's where they find their passion and talent. Okay. And there we go. And that's what Ofsted will be looking at. How well leaders include pupils with SEND in all aspects of school life. And it is, and let's deal with the quite serious point here, that if we visit a school where children with special educational needs are constantly missing out on key learning in other areas, such as those educational visits or such as those foundation subjects, it points to what's called curriculum narrowing. And in the case of curriculum narrowing, it is likely that leadership and management will be deemed as inadequate. However, let's give some reassurance to avoid the panic. Sometimes children with special needs will need a catch-up, but just be mindful that they can't miss out on the same valuable opportunities at the same time all the time. And we encourage schools to be flexible, but make the focus making sure that they get it the first time round. Quality first curriculum implementation. And then in the code of practice, okay, and there it is, in that legal right in the code of practice, ensure that children and young people with SEND engage in the activities alongside pupils who don't have SEND, that they're fully involved. Okay, and if you wanted questions to find out how well, these are questions you might ask of your school. Okay, now, what I want to do, and hopefully I'm okay for time, Jane, is that okay? I want to share now a case study, okay? Now, this is, and I want to stress it, this is a fictional school, okay? And I have to stress as much as possible, I put it in the title because I want to impress it, it's fictional. However, the phenomena you see now are phenomena that Ofsted have seen. Okay, we have been made aware of it. And what I want to do now is I'm hopefully going to be able to access the chat as well, because as I go through, I'm going to share some information and I want people to use the chat function to share their thoughts. So let me tell you about Riverdale Fictional Conservatory. But there it is, brand new building. Okay, it's really lovely and it's always sunny in Riverdale Fictional Conservatory. Okay, it's a secondary school. There's 1,203 children on roll, and of those children, 600 require SEND support. Okay, sorry, not 600, it's 300, sorry. Okay, I've got the chat function over the numbers, here we go. Okay, and of those children, 6 have got education and healthcare plans. Okay, just to remind you, it's a fictional school. Okay, so in the chat function now, any thoughts, put into the comments, and I've got the chat function on, anything that's coming up that making you think by looking at that information. And what I would say, be brave, and well done, Paul, for being the first one. High proportion of children we SEND. And Paul, thank you so much for being the first one there. Can I reassure people who might be panicking at the moment, thinking that their SEND register is a similar size? That doesn't mean anything from Ofsted. What it means is it's a question that Ofsted will ask about how well you're meeting those needs. June, thank you. Over identification. Low EHC. Helen, thank you. Okay. Too many pupils with SEND. There is that question. Do all these children have SEND? Okay. Simon, thank you. Well done. You've been listening really well. Is the graduated response from using appropriately? Thank you. Perhaps a focus is needed on high quality teaching. Lorraine, thank you so much. Yes, it really is. Okay. These are absolutely brilliant, really powerful points. Thank you so much for getting involved. Let me tell you a bit more about Riverdale now. Okay. All right, so when we looked at the information report, it said that all staff are experts, which is fantastic, really, really positive. Remember, all teachers are a teacher of children with SEND. Okay. Inclusion manager feels that when they feel a child might have needs, they always err on the side of caution. Okay, and they put the child on the special needs register. And those EHC plans are really useful advice for teaching assistants who lead the Aspire curriculum. Okay, so thank you, Ellen. Well done. You've already spotted that question. Okay. And actually, those who lead the Aspire curriculum, which are teaching assistants, feel they're really well supported because they accessed the one training, what is SEND training. Okay. Thank you, Matt. You picked up why our TA's leading. Okay. All right. And then the final point here is the year 8 pupils are really excited because the curriculum helps them to get the maths and English they need and gets them ready for college. Any thoughts? TAs using EHCPs. Okay. What about teachers? Excellent. Thank you so much, Dawn. Brilliant. Should not, thank you, Becky, really. SEND registers should not be used as a monitoring tool. Simon, well done, actually. Sounds like Aspire could be a form of exclusion. Okay, is that actually? Conrad, over-identification without good evidence. Narrow curriculum, maths and English. Thank you, Lorraine, for picking that point. Okay, and Joanna, thank you for picking up that point. Why only college? It's a year 8. Why is it their aspiration is about what happens 3 years in the future? Okay, really powerful. These are really, really, thank you so much. Okay, great, thank you. Only college, brilliant. Lower expectations. These are, okay, brilliant. And this narrowed curriculum, that focus on English and maths is what we've talked about so far already. So thank you so much. Okay, and Lorraine, thank you for your point, not individualized and specific enough. Let's move on. Let me tell you more about Riverdale. Okay, all right. Ellen, thank you as much for your comment as well. Okay, so the curriculum leader feels that the development of the Aspire curriculum has been really positive for the school. Okay, she feels that the inclusion managers worked really hard to identify a set of lessons that the teaching assistants can use. Okay. Okay, the inclusion manager that thinks it's going to be better next year when these children can join with other children. They're going to provide inclusion opportunities to join them along. Okay, the pupils who attend the Aspire curriculum saying they're not worried that they don't go to other lessons because it was too hard. And another one say it's okay they miss PE because they attend, they play football at the local Premier League academy. So it's okay they miss PE. Well, and let's look at the last point then. And the parents, they feel they're doing well, but they wish they did something else besides English and maths. Okay, so let's see what thoughts we've got from yourselves. Okay, why aren't subject specialists in developing their curriculum? Excellent, Claire. Thank you so much. The inclusion manager is doing the whole curriculum. Well, is the inclusion manager a specialist in all those subjects in a secondary school? Okay, these are questions that we'll be asking. Thank you, Miranda. Physical education is more than football. It certainly is. And even for those young people who are specialists, who are obviously playing football at a high level, okay, actually there's more to sport than just that, than just football. Saying that, I'm sat in the middle of Bolton Wanderers football stadium, and I don't think I should be saying that too loud at the moment. Okay, lack of equality access. Thank you, Lorraine. Not an ambitious. If they're talented, thank you, Becky. Yes, if they're talented in PE, they still need challenging. Okay, preparation for adulthood. Well done, Lorraine. Really powerful point as well. Okay, thank you so much for getting involved in these conversations. Really appreciate it. Okay, Shan, thank you. Are the gaps being closed? The views at the moment, they talk about English and maths. That's their reality. They're in the Aspire curriculum. Okay. Right. Next one, okay, so the pastoral management. Okay, so in the previous years, they identified that there was a problem with 12 young people with special needs who were finding dinner times difficult. So what they did, they set up a different provision. They set up a different playground where 12 young people now are supervised by 8 members of staff. Okay, all right. So any views about that one? Okay, lunch and after school clubs are well attended, but none of the pupils from the Aspire groups attend. That's quite interesting. Okay, and then finally, the governors say that the head of school assures them, and this was a quote, that special needs kids do everything the other pupils do and they get the right qualifications to get them to colleges. Okay, any thoughts? Okay, exclusion to wraparound activities. Thank you, Lorraine. Gillian, why don't they attend? Brilliant, Gillian. That's a question I'd be asking as well. Okay, training for midday supervisors, support for social development. June, really powerful point. 12 members of staff, 12 young people. Why isn't the school using those members of staff to support overcome those barriers rather than actually reinforcing those barriers? Okay, Dawn, I think you put it perfectly there with all my word. Okay, leadership and management inadequate. Aspire students are not attending clubs. There is a question there. Why are they not attending? Because actually, go back to what those young people said before. They said it was okay they weren't doing the other subjects because it was too hard. Well, where's their ambition for themselves? Have they just actually come to the view where they don't accept ambition anymore? Okay. Are Aspire clips actually invited? Yes. Is there people overcoming the barriers for them to be there? Okay. Governor is assured. Yes. And thank you for putting inverted commas there, Laura. Okay. Assured. What does that mean? Do governors actually see that firsthand, or do they take what's been told to them by the head of school? Because remember, the head of school said that all teachers are SEND specialists because they provide 1 session of SEND training a year. Is the head of school, do they have an understanding of SEND? Okay, let's look at some other points. Sounds like a medical model, Lorraine. Thank you. Thank you, Joanna. Hopefully I didn't pick up my anger when I said about special needs kids in inverted commas. Okay, gives the view that students with SEND are owned by the SEND team. So bolt-on, thank you. Brilliant. Where's peer modelling? Brilliant point. Really, really strong there. Okay, so what I want to do now, okay, I want to talk about some of the questions I would think about if I was inspecting. Well, my first view is, what is their understanding of SEND? Because it would appear that their understanding of SEND is purely those children who are of a lower ability. For them, when they talk about SEND, it's automatically straight, well, that must be children of low ability. And I said earlier on that one question a lead inspector will ask your head teacher on the call, they'll say, what is your understanding of SEND in your school? And if your head teacher at any point gives the view that their view is that children with SEND are low ability, that says straight away about low ambition. And that opens up, because actually SEND is not always about children with low ability. Many children with special needs do find it difficult, but some children with special needs are exceptionally able. It's just they have barriers, and those barriers would help them achieve even more. Okay, so what I want you to do now is, and I want everyone to be brave now, pick a word to describe Riverdale Fictional Conservatory and put it into the chat. One word to describe your view by listening to what we've talked about. Okay, elitist, thank you, Joanna. Failing, inadequate, limited, misguided, limiting, deplorable, segregation, narrow, old-fashioned, misinformed, narrow, non-inclusive, uninclusive, inadequate, okay, limiting, okay. And I would agree with the words inadequate, okay. And from Ofsted's perspective, what I need to tell you is that any one of those points would open up a line of questioning, an emerging hypothesis in inspection team about the quality of SEND provision in the school. If we looked at a series of those factors coming together, we're then pointing towards that actually children with SEND don't get a good deal. And if we see quite a few of those factors, well, then we have a confirmed triangulation that children with SEND do not get a good deal. And going back to what I said at the beginning, that means the quality of education is inadequate and the school therefore is inadequate. I talked about SEND being a platinum thread. Okay, it's a platinum thread because it's so important. Okay, whether you're on this conference or on this webinar because you're passionate about outcomes for children with SEND, well, hopefully I've given you the tools to ask the right questions. If you're here as a leader wanting to know where SEND fits, well, what I do want to say to you is SEND has never had such a high profile. And if the children in your provisions do not access high quality, that will bring the judgment down. Okay, all right. So I want to finish with an analogy, and then I'm just checking, am I okay for time for 30 seconds more? Great, okay. This is the way that Ofsted look at it now, and I'm going to give an account. We've all been faced at our times where we've wanted to get on a train. We've perhaps gone from Manchester to London or even further, and we've spent ages trying to find the right train. We know that train will get us there in the quickest time. It gets us there. It'll actually be really efficient. It'll go really fast. Okay, and that is the focus. We know that our next step is going to get us there really quickly, but sometimes the journey isn't as straightforward. And actually what happens is we need to get that bus replacement service. Now that bus replacement might look amazing. It might look just as comfortable as the train, and it might be driven by the most wonderful driver. Okay, and it actually might be quite comfortable, but it's not the train. It's going slower. It's not the vision. It's not the getting somebody there as quickly as they'd want to, in the way they'd want to. Okay, it might look amazing, but it's not the train. It's that train was the best way to get there. It got us there quickest. It made sure that we got most from the next step in our day. It made sure that we had the great time in London. Okay, it wasn't making sure the journey. Okay, now, all a child with special educational needs wants is to be given the tools to get back on the train. Okay, not to spend their entire education on the replacement service because the train wasn't right for them. Okay, that child we send, it's about finding the way to get them back on the train, get them back on that highly ambitious aspirational curriculum that all the other young people are facing. The way to get them back on there so they can get that journey to those best possible outcomes. The bus might be wonderful. It might be driven by the most wonderful teaching assistant. It might actually be, and they might care deeply about the children, but it's not the train. It's not the high quality curriculum with a high quality curriculum implementation. It's a bus replacement service. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I think then hopefully we've got a few minutes for questions. Is that okay? So Francesca, has there any questions that have come up during the... Not at the moment. Okay. Has anybody got any questions for me?
One.
Not at the moment.
One's just come in to say, thinking
Okay.
about the school timetable, should the
Yeah.
school environment include movement around the school during the school day? Also, should the way the students are grouped be included in the environment that it has been looked at?
Okay. Can you say that question? I think I lost you in the middle of that, Emily.
That's okay. Thinking about the school timetable,
Yeah.
should the school environment include movement around the school during the school day? Also, should the way students are grouped be included in the environment that is being looked at?
Okay, I think the first part of the question, I think that's going to come down to a judgment call by the school, really, that in terms of making sure that children are in the right places at the right time. In terms of the second aspect then, about the groupings, I think it is something that Ofsted would ask. Okay, are the children with special educational needs accessing the curriculum? And does that mean the groupings mean they're accessing that high quality curriculum? Okay, I'm not sure I've answered that properly, but I think that's how I've read it, if that's okay.
Right, there's a couple more, Chris.
Okay.
What if the child's education healthcare plan has got a lot of interventions in it, e.g. SALT, OT, reading.
Okay, thank you. Really good question. Thank you for that. We'd be asking how many of those can be reasonably done as part of the curriculum. Remember, the curriculum is to meet the needs of children. So how many of those can be met by adaptations to that curriculum implementation? If there is absolutely essential elements of that provision that cannot be met in any other way except them being out of the class, well, what is mentioned before, what's to make sure they're not missing out the same valuable learning in other areas, okay, at the same time, so they're flexible with that, okay. So the first thing is always going to be what can be done as much as possible so that curriculum gives opportunities to have those needs met within the traditional lessons. Okay.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a few more coming through. So just for everybody's posting questions, thank you very much. If we don't get all of the questions responded to before the end of this, the time runs out today, we will post some responses later on. So there's a further question. The line in the EIF around the adaptation of the curriculum for SEND students, what does practice look like? What does good practice look like? Sorry.
No, that's a great question. Thank you for posing it. I'm going to be really awkward now and go back to my very first point I made in the presentation. What I don't want to do is give the answers. All I would say is you need to know what high quality curriculum implementation looks like, high quality adaptations for your young people. You will know what your curriculum is, okay? And you will know the themes we talked about today, okay? It would be wrong for me to almost say, this looks like this, because then my worry is everybody will do it and it won't be their journeys, it won't be their aspirations. So please forgive me, whoever posed that question, for not answering it directly.
That's fine. Maybe. Okay, next one. So thanks, Lisa. How do you manage to offer interventions in Section F EHCP or from local advisors for case students, and then also not remove the students to access these interventions? Would this be viewed negatively? Okay,
I think it will go back to the point I said before. I think I might have answered a similar question. If the school have really considered the section in their plan and the interventions, if any of those can be taught alongside peers, okay, within the curriculum, then that is good practice. If they can't, okay, actually it still could be positive practice that they have an appropriate intervention. However, we just ask schools to be mindful they're not missing out on the same valuable opportunities at all the time. So I don't want to say that intervention is not a good thing when it's done separately. It can really help to meet the needs of children, but it's asking leaders to really consider what the child is missing out and how much they're missing out of it.
Brilliant, thank you, Chris. I think, Laura, that also answered the question that you've posed. We've got a question from Conrad, and Conrad has asked us, how should pupil voice be used to shape the curriculum offer?
Fantastic, brilliant. Thank you very much, Conrad. Okay, Conrad, I mentioned before about the graduated approach, okay, and that review process that goes on to develop things. That's where the young person's voice is. That graduated approach involves all the stakeholders, those who work with the children, but the parents, and most importantly, the young person. So that's how it should be involved. Do they think their needs are well met? Do they access the curriculum? In the case study I gave you, remember those young people said that it was okay they weren't accessing because it was too difficult. Well, actually, that says something about the curriculum implementation. Their voice should have been recognised. But the place of young people's voices is in that graduated approach. Is that constant? Is this working for you?
Brilliant, thank you. I think we've just got one last question I think we've got time for. So Andrew has asked us, are you saying that providing a room where some SEND students may choose to spend lunchtime sometimes might be construed as a negative bit of provision? Okay.
I think, Andrew, in one of the words you've chosen there, you might have answered it yourself. Okay, you talked about choosing. Okay, has the young person, the case study I gave you, those young people didn't have a choice. That's where they needed to go. All I would say is if those children with SEND have chosen to be there. What I would say, I guarantee there'll be other children who might not have special education needs who might choose to go there as well. Okay, if the children are choosing, it's their voice. That's powerful. It's not been implemented on them or enforced on them. So on those cases, if there is a space, that's fine.
Brilliant. I think that's all we've got time for this afternoon. So thank you. A big thank you, Chris. It's been so informative. I know I've really enjoyed listening to you. I'm now going to copy your platinum thread, because I just think that is fabulous. Platinum thread with diamonds on for me. But yeah, thank you so much for that. I think for people on the call, if you maybe before the next webinar, if you can go away and really consider some of Chris's messages and how that works with your school curriculum, so you can really think about how that inclusive approach to students throughout your school can really be met, and get them a broad as possible offer for their curriculum. I think it's just fabulous. So thank you, Chris, for coming to join us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant. I've loved every minute of it. So, and I think looking at the comments people have made, they have as well, and really engaged with us today. So thank you all who've attended today so much. I hope you've taken a lot away from today's session.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.